Hello, USA.
It is me. I am here in Gdansk.
Yes, you are in the middle of the woods.
It's amazing here. And it's much cooler here than it is in the States right now.
Cooler?
The temperature is about 10 degrees Fahrenheit.
No idea.
No, is about, it's hot in the United States right now.
Okay, in Torun it was hot, right? We just came back from your festival from Torun, where Joe was teaching and performing and directing. How was it?
It was great. It was a great festival. It was nice to be in another place that's not the insanity of the United States right now. As we're recording this, I've been in the United States since Trump got shot at and since Joe Biden stepped down.
Damn.
And so it's been good to be in Europe while things go crazy. Mm-hmm. And then there's been record heat there, even amongst all of the politicians who say there's no global warming. But I haven't had to think about all that until right now. This should be a great podcast.
Okay. Yeah. Is there a political improv in the US? Do people reach the politics a lot or not at all?
I don't think so. I mean, not that I know of. Offhand, I think there's improvisers that post politically aware stuff online and with some pointed points of view. Yeah, nothing comes to mind where people are actively, holding political rallies or anything in the guise of an improv game, story, or long form.
Mm-hmm. But I realized when I was there in Chicago in winter that there's a lot of pop cultural references. Yes, this thing.
Yep.
That sometimes I was watching a show with Amadeus and I think I asked him like 3 times, like, what is this joke about? I don't know. Like, I don't know if we have as many like pop cultural references like all the time.
Well, where were you at I.O. or Second City?
That was Annoyance.
I think right now, I think America is sort of soaking in pop culture reference to keep their minds off of everything that's terrible. And I mean, pop culture references, I think, have always been, at least for the last 10 or 15, 20 years, part of American improv. I think it's a reflection of how shallow my country is in general, and especially amongst younger people. And I mean, you just missed... You're not what are you, Gen X?
No.
What are
I'm
you?
a millennial.
Are you millennial?
I am.
Oh my gosh, are you?
Yes.
Okay.
I know yesterday you told me that I'm the youngest 55-year-old you've ever met.
You are.
but I'm a millennial.
Yeah, I think that the improvisers that were born with the internet and they grew up being babysat by apps on phones where parents couldn't do that when I grew up. I think there's a lot of pop culture reference, and then things like TikTok it's just too fast for me, and I think a lot in my generation. I don't get that, but I also think that in flavors improvisation now, especially after the pandemic, I think post-pandemic, more and more there's just less things that are actually funny in the world. And so when people are desperate to be funny when they improvise, they go for what's in the media or what's in the popular mindset, the gestalt of people that would consume improv. And so I think it's TikTok and Instagram and the Kardashians and something as absurd as reality show host who might want to be president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but was the world funnier in the 90s or 80s?
Maybe.
I don't remember. You were stoned all the time.
It's, yeah, we were high. We yes.
You just said it like in the, not that you were But the times of like 90s were like sex, drugs, and rock and roll in improv.
I think that the late 80s through 2000 was my time at the Annoyance. And for sure, there was sex, drugs, and rock and roll that was going on at that time. And a lot of, but there was pop culture reference too there, I suppose. And I think we had come out of Reagan and George Bush. And so those were the Clinton years. And Bill Clinton was, he was a little sexy old president beast, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And I think, and in Chicago specifically, that was the time of Michael Jordan and the Bulls. And even though a lot of improvisers or artists didn't care about that, it was hard to be in Chicago and not feel that type of euphoria. So it was sex, drugs, rock and roll, and the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. But I think there were still pop culture references there. And I think that was a time for me before I really started touring internationally, where in Chicago they taught us, don't think about story, just like kind of be in discovery of what's going on. And so I arrived in Chicago in 1985 with, a brain that was about stories. And they said, don't tell stories, just be in the jazz of it. So I was fed a lot of jazz. And I think that jazz ideas, then that sort of has been part of the framing of like what I teach is like, we have an engineer and a jazz musician in our brain. And so the question is, how do we bring those things into harmony? So I think a lot of people that don't really have jazz and they're trying to engineer comedy, what they reach for is pop culture references or things that audiences can quickly relate to. And I think that's probably true in any era. There's just more stuff out there now.
And now, as we talked, there is more and more awareness of neurodivergency, right? So we have more people diagnosed, like me a week ago, with ADHD finally.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Finally, something cool.
Why are you looking out the window? Gosha, come back.
No. Wait, what?
Hello.
Listen, you're lucky that I still know how to go with conversations and not just jump into the distractions all the time. What I'm doing actually right now. So there's more and more people who are aware of their way of thinking and that the brain can work in different ways. And like ADHD or autism or the spectrum is quite on fire right now, like the topic.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, even my generation, even just, I think in the 90s and early 2000s, we started hearing people talk about the importance of mental health and even things like trauma. I was raised by parents that were kind of out of World War II as kids. And being in America, that sort of macho, and actually, to be fair, all over the world, the macho thing of you come back from war and you just keep it to yourself and you don't acknowledge any trauma that might have happened, and then you pass that trauma on to your children so that they can become comedians and improvisers.
Yes, exactly.
I
know.
Yeah, it gave a lot of us, so many people of my generation, and I think I'm one generation ahead of you, but we had parents that were traumatized and passed trauma on to us, and the way that some of us dealt with it was through intellectualization, through comedy and whatnot. And then I think some of us, like me, had curiosity about psychology to figure out what the hell is going on? Why do I think like this? And then, I started being interested in neuroscience in the 90s. And, parallel to me, a lot of diagnoses of a lot of different conditions started happening. And now there's even kids that were raised with apps and the internet and whatnot. There's a lot of ADHD they're saying is caused by all this stimulation to the brain. And so for sure, that stuff is all out there now, and there's more labels for it. And, consequently, I think there's just more people. There's more people in improv in general now I mean, I think obviously than ever before. And so some of that is going to be, people with neurodivergent variations, varieties, whatnot. And so that has to get dealt with. So, I mean, comedy is a coping mechanism. Improvising is a thing we all do every day to get by.
Yep.
And some of it just happens to be theatrical. So, it's here. It's here with a whole lot of other stuff.
So, do you see how traumatized you were and what brought you to comedy?
Oh, for sure. I have a show about it.
Right.
It's yeah, as you know, after COVID was not even over a year, then I found out I had 3 cancers.
Yeah.
And at the end of 2022,
Because comedy goes in threes.
comedy, yeah, it was 3, and colon, kidney, and then rule of threes, punchline, prostate. And so between surgeries and chemotherapy and more surgeries and hormones and all of this stuff, when you're sitting around and you're just jacked up on chemo drugs and you can't improvise, then I would write stuff down, and I realized it's like, oh shit, I have a show.
Yeah.
And a book that I've been saying I was going to write for 20 something years. So for sure that I wrote a solo show, and I've recorded it once in New Zealand. I'm going to record it again, I think, up in Portland. And it's called Surviving Consciousness, Lessons Learned from Cancer, LSD, and Michael Jordan. And so
Yes.
I talk about some of the trauma there. And I'm not, there's, in the last 5 years since COVID, there's a number of comedians who have been dealing with trauma, talking about trauma. I don't know if you ever have seen Neil Brennan.
No.
He's on Netflix, and he had still has a special from 5 years ago, I guess, or either right before or right after COVID, called Three Mics, short for microphones.
I saw that.
And then he did another one just a year or 2 ago called Blocks, and then Blocks really even dives farther into mental illness and psychological conditions. And he coined the phrase. He said nowadays and in the upcoming years, there's more and more traumedy that's going to be happening. And so I think he's pretty brilliant, and I think that term and that prediction is accurate. And then he just did another special, and I can't remember the name of it, but in that special, he starts off by saying, "I'm all better. I'm happy now."
I think I saw that too. I just did not recognize the name. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, but before that, I guess comedians were just maybe less aware why they do what they do. And now we have more knowledge, as you say, about mental health and everything. And because we analyze ourselves more, because we go to therapy, we see our patterns, and then we're like, oh, okay. So
yeah,
that's it.
Enough people with degrees have observed enough of us and studied patterns in our behavior, and now there's books that describe us.
Yeah, exactly. About book. What's the premise of your book?
Well, my book is kind of in 3 different parts. My book is called Maybe It's Your Fault, an improv book.
Really?
Yeah.
I love it.
And so, and Daniel Arantia, who our friend from Colombia, he's going to do the artwork. We've talked about that. And so now he's waiting for me. It's like, come on. Yeah. But the cover of the book, spoiler alert, the cover of the book is going to be a finger pointing at a face on profile, and the face looking, and then you open the book and you see that it's someone pointing at themselves. Yes. And so some of it will deal with how the skills that are foundational in improvisation are skills that a lot of us acquired from coping with childhood trauma. And without it being a clinical take so much on it, but just my personal story, part of it will be going through some of the trauma from my dad, some of the trauma from my mom, some of the trauma from growing up Catholic, and some of the trauma just of making sense with the wiring I had in my head. And then that will lead into a little bit of, I studied the neuroscience of self-consciousness and
What?
yep,
When?
for the last 20 years. And I did things. There's a neuroscientist called Dr. Charles Lim who has TED Talks and things on YouTube, and he calls himself the rapping neuroscientist. And he studies, among other things, the neuroscience of flow and freestyle rappers. And so it's like flow versus a lack of flow, just to be simple. And so again, I'll use a metaphor rather than actual neuroscience because I'm too lazy to get a degree. But this metaphor of, what exactly is the makeup of the engineer in our brain, and then what exactly is the makeup of the jazz musician in our brain, and then how do we optimize each of those sensibilities when we're doing different improvisation?
Nice.
And what's neurologically true is the more we are in a jazz state of mind, the more blind we typically become to engineering opportunities when we improvise, and vice versa. The more we lead with our engineer brain, which is most people, the more blind to jazz opportunities we become, or we just don't have access to the other level of the unspoken, the unanalytical. From an acting point of view, how do we access what's in between the words that we say to each other? What's in our behavior? What's the emotion, the psychological awareness, the thoughts, all of that stuff. So that's a big part of it. And then the third part of the book, I'm going to lay out a model for improv groups to use and some individuals, and it's going to be based in the idea that it will be healthy for improv groups to have a conversation that they don't have right now. That includes, on the one hand, why am I or every individual in this group improvising? How do I see myself as an improviser? In what capacity do I want to live as an improviser in my life? And then what is our goal as a group? How do we want to improvise? Why are we improvising as a group? And so there'll be 9 different blocks, but they'll be the same on each of the axes. So I'll categorize groups and individuals as either recreational, hobby, or professional. And rather than telling people what that is, I will. I've drawn up some questions that are like facilitated questions in the book, like, well, what does it mean for us, for this group, to just be hobbyists? Or what does it mean if we aspire to be professional? Or what does it mean if we're just going to do this recreationally? Bar prov, if we're hobbyists, is there a specific improv that we like and we don't care about anything else? It could be genre, it could be musical, it could be, whatever. And if we're hobbyist, and we, do we want like costumes? Do we want to take into account, understanding the history? Do we need to read the books? Do we, perform in a theater where we can dress it up? If we want to do this professionally now, then can we take all the stuff that a hobbyist nerd would take and then say, okay, now let's add commerce to this. And how do we get butts in the seats? And how do we market this? And what's our responsibility? And again, rather than me saying what that is, I think different groups should have the autonomy and the agency as a group to figure out for themselves without having to feel pressure to live up to how another group, and even a neighboring town or somewhere else in the world, is doing it. And so I think at this point in time in improv, actually over the years in improv, when I've seen groups that get tired of each other, or I see groups that have internal struggles, it's because individuals in the group are doing it for a different reason.
Yes.
And so that people aspire to a more professional presentation and more professional skill sets. They don't have a way to talk to people who just want to, come once a week and barely, maybe I'm up for one rehearsal a month. Well, what if the group wants to rehearse 4 times a month? Do you want to rehearse 4 times a month because you want to be professional, or is it because it's a hobby and it's a social activity, and you want to nerd out on Jane Austen or Shakespeare or Star Trek? Or if it's just a recreational group, then why 4 times a month are we gonna practice? And so again, just like every place in the world, I think there's people in improvisation who want to mandate that all improvisation should be one thing, and all improv has to be this way, all improv has to take this into account, all improv has to search to have the perfect balance of this, that, or the other. And I think that there's some good heart behind a lot of it, but it's also it's driven by a lot of people that are seeking recognition and seeking to control something that you can't really control.
When someone tells me improv is this, you have to do it like this, I'm like, I'm just instantly like, don't tell me how to live my life. Mm-hmm. Even if the ideas are good, but when someone tells me this is it, mm-hmm. and not the other way around, mm-hmm. I'm just instantly going other way.
Yeah.
Because, like, how? And I know that people teach what they believe, which is great. I love the going to a workshop to just hear the specific perspective of a person. Mm-hmm. But when they say this is the only way, then I'm like, yeah, sure, of course. But what you said about the group and the individuals and knowing why you do improv, I just recently recorded a podcast when I was just blabbling by myself about how to start and how to gather a group. So that's kind of fresh in my mind. And what I think is that there is, first of all, the problems that may happen are connected to the fact, as you said, that individuals don't really know what they want and mm-hmm. who they are for me. Like, I think that people are not fully aware quite often when they start, mm-hmm. when they form a group, who are they on stage? Who are they artistically?
I completely agree. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're in your first 5 years of doing improv.
Of course.
Because in your first 2 years, you're not even a beginning improviser. You're just a sponge.
Yes.
And you're doing this because it seems fun, or you saw it, or maybe you were in a jam and that seemed fun. And then it's the first instinct is like anything else. I want to find other people to do this with.
And that's another problem for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's people going with this impulse, which is all great, but I mean that it then may cause problems, is that they just bump into each other. Like, you want to do improv, I want to do improv. And they have no idea who they are individually.
That's right.
So we have 5 people, let's say, who have no idea about what they want and who they are.
Yep.
And then they don't know what they want to do together.
Yep.
So that's another problem. So it's connected to what you said.
Yeah. I mean, it's like dating.
Exactly.
I mean, you can meet somebody in a bar and you can look at each other and maybe like kind of make out at the end of the night, and you go away and you're like, let's keep making out. And then before you know anything, it's like, speaking from a little experience here. Yeah. And, then you go on a couple of dates and it's just like, oh, this is pretty good, but okay. Well, I can do this for a while. And part of like, I can do this for a while is, well, I don't really know what I'm looking for, but making out is fun. And it's fun to be in a bar with this person. But, maybe you sleep one way and I sleep another way. And then it's like all of a sudden, if we sleep next to each other, okay. And then, maybe I'm a neat person and, maybe you're a clutter person, or maybe, all of this stuff just kind of comes into it. And, the commonality is people just want to be in a relationship. And whether it's a romantic relationship or an improv relationship, in my opinion, if you don't know who you are in a romantic relationship or an improv relationship, there's, like everything, there's an expiration date on it. There's an expiration date on everything, but sometimes in learning who you are, you have to be with a group to learn who you are in one context.
Yes.
And then now all of a sudden, who you are is not right to be in that group anymore. And then people, the number of good breakups is so small.
Yeah.
Good or healthy breakups is so small compared to, bad, unhealthy, soul crushing, whatever breakups. But it's like nobody's entitled to be in a relationship. Nobody's entitled to be in an improv group.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and it's like we have to be entitled to ourselves for our own happiness. And so it would be great. And I'm debating whether or not to talk about this in my book, but it would be great if I have had a couple of relationships where we knew this is for a period of time. This isn't the whole thing. And I've had things that look like relationships.
Oh yeah, I know that.
And
Yes.
I have a partner that I have been relationing with. I've told you about this.
Yes.
And it's like neither one of us wants to be in a relationship, but where a relationship might show up in our world, we just do this. We'll meet up a couple times a year. We'll play together. We do dinner well. We do other places well. We improvise together well, but we also live in different places. We have different lives. That type of we like relationing because it's a verb, but there's no way it could work if we lived in the same city. We know that we have a thing that will be a thing as long as each of us are happy to do this thing. And to me, I think that's an interesting model for improv groups.
We are the same person, goddammit, because I was exactly using the metaphors of dating and relationship in that episode that I just recorded.
Yeah.
Exactly, because for me it's exactly the same. And as you're saying, it's just like sorry for my voice, guys, but as you can hear, I'm just straight from the festival and it breaks a little once in a while. But
it was a great festival.
It was a great festival. And I was going to sleep responsibly at 4.
Me too.
And others were waiting for the sun to come up by the Wisła River, so we were the good kids because we had many rehearsals from the mornings, and you had many workshops.
Yes.
But about relationships, yes, that's exactly it, and just first maybe learn what you need, who you are, what do you want, so you can also find someone who maybe wants similar things.
Yeah, I mean, I heard at this festival, I've heard at other festivals, there's mostly people in their 20s, some in their early 30s. I just started doing this a year or two ago, or I started doing this during the pandemic, and then I came out and I started doing this more, and I just want to do this all the time, and it's all I want to do, and it's everything, blah, 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 blah. It's like, do you want to date that person? I don't want to date that person. And it's like, if you have 6 of those people and you start a group, the dating metaphor is like, that's a crush. That's a manic crush.
Yes.
And so
that's love bombing.
Yeah. Is it log bumping?
Love bombing.
I like log bumping if it's a group of all guys. That's log bumping.
That sounds like male improv group, yes.
And I like love bumping as well. But improv can be a drug because it can release the natural drugs in our brains.
Yes, and it's perfect for ADHDers with instant dopamine.
Yes, and it's perfect for depressed people, for oxytocin. It's perfect for anxious people who can get around anxious people. It's perfect. One of the great and horrible things about improvisation, theatrical improvisation as a creative proposition. I resist calling improv an art form, but improvisation can teach itself.
Elaborate.
Improvisation, whether you believe in rules or not, there's books on improvisation, and in my day, most people started with games anyway. So if you read directions on how a game is supposed to go, and have a bottle of wine, then six people can play some games and they can learn fairly quickly what's fun about playing, what's a fun way to play the game and what's not a fun way to play the game. And, people that are selfish, that you can have like a bunch of type A corporate people who want to play games, and it's like this ego battle competition type thing, and it's not the way that maybe a theatrical improviser would approach it, but it's not to say those people couldn't have fun doing it. And so I think because it is, it's like a board game without a board. People can read how to do games, or they can watch Whose Line Is It Anyway on TV and just recreationally play improv.
Yeah.
And there's, it's also weird because it's difficult to make money doing just improv.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people think, well, I want to make money, so I better coach. And usually it's like by the end of year 2, it's like, all right, I think I get this. I can coach a group. And the truth is you can, because improv can coach and teach itself.
Okay.
And you're irrelevant. But you can tell people what to do and then rub your chin and then, give them some feedback. And it doesn't matter if it's great feedback or damaging or hurtful or you get lucky or whatever. There's still part of you being there after 2 or 3 years. It's just kind of irrelevant. Or you're just like you're a DM in a very rudimentary game of Dungeons and Dragons, where there's no dungeons, there's no dragons. There's just, the alphabet game or Foursquare or Emotion Option or whatever. So you're just you're telling people what to do. And there begins like one of the big problems at improv, which is part of improv in game and in some schools where there's a director that moderates the narrators. It's literally part of improv is having a person sitting in power who gets to tell people what to do.
Yeah.
And part of the spectrum of neurodiverse issues, whether it's a consequence of a neurological condition or it's just, narcissistic lack of
sounds familiar.
Decency.
I heard about narcissists.
I mean, there's people that they get a drug release from telling people what to do. And then people that are new with improv, and it's the only thing that they want to do, and they want to do this, and you say you are better off if you have a coach, and you're really better off if you have a good coach who can help guide you as individuals, by giving you fun suggestions, but also by giving you some feedback or nudging you in the right direction, so that you can, if you're going to take this practicing of this game or practicing of whatever you're doing and put it in front of an audience, that they can help facilitate skills in you that will ultimately make that audience member feel like they got value for whatever they paid for it. Including, we're just doing this recreationally. We're going to invite our friends to come. And part of the value you can provide your friends is not having them feel regret that they came and watched your improv. Because a certain cut of our friends won't tell you that they have regret, but they'll laugh and they'll pretend like they had a good time, especially if they can bring alcohol. And then they'll say, one of the greatest lies in improv is that was fun.
No.
But it's also, if all you're doing it for is just the recreation fun of it, then it is fun in that context.
What do you tell people when they had a shitty show and they ask you, hey, how was it?
I mean, a lot of them don't. Because, I'll tell them. But at the end of the day, I mean, I've done this for a long time. And the one thing about having a lot of experience is people with a lot of it, with very little experience, they're already beating themselves up. They're already in imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
They're already hypercritical, and they're criticizing themselves in more ways than I could, but they're probably not criticizing themselves in any useful way. And
Yeah.
it's probably tied to criticism that they learned as a child in a dysfunctional family or something. So that even if I could give them constructive feedback, they couldn't hear it because their brain is already in this tangle of self-criticism that's non-productive. That frankly is a phase that I think a lot of us have to go through anyway, so that we can get tired and exhausted and say, maybe I should see a therapist
Yes.
and change that. But I mean, I will. The other thing is I won't sit through a bad improv show. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine if I'm seeing a show and I'm not a part of that show in some way, then I will sit in back and, I'll give you a small period of time. And if I can't watch, I can't watch. It's Patty Stiles gave me the best.
Yes.
This is the most honest thing. It's like, if I can't be a good audience member, then I'm not going to be there.
Yeah. Just before you go to Patty, I just want to say that we are the same person.
I know.
And I was just also saying, and I say it a lot too, like in the conversations, that just recently passed the Polish actor Jerzy Sztur, and that he was saying that he gives 15 minutes to the show, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, he leaves, because he just doesn't want to waste his life and energy. So I have this saying like, okay, I'm asking myself, would Sztur stay or leave? And I'm like, Sztur would leave, I leave. So I'm like, more or less 15 minutes, especially during festivals when you have like 6 hours of shows and sometimes you just have to take a break.
Yeah, you can't. I think once you're 40, or if you've been doing it for 10 years, I think that pretty quickly how this is going to go.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, there can be value in watching something that's going horribly wrong.
That's tempting to stay. If it's something that is really a nightmare, then it's interesting in a way.
Yeah, because I'm interested in how people cope with it. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times, as I see it, because to your point, I believe this very deeply. If you don't know who you are in the show, then it's just going to be a desperate race to define and figure out, who am I? And when I teach, I teach acting stuff that's kind of around Meisner-y acting stuff, and I'm an advocate for, in dramatic improv or scenic improvisation, where we're not playing game, but we're just playing for honest relationship. Like very quickly in the first 30 seconds of the scene, I have a workshop, the first 30 seconds, it's understanding who am I, who are you, who are we, which to me is tied up in how am I, how are you, how are we, how are we. And when I see improvisers, the baseline emotional state of improvisers in their engineer brain is just anxiety and fear. Mm-hmm. And when I see anxiety and fear on stage in a human body, then I'm not looking at a character. I'm just looking at an improviser who either doesn't know enough to take a step into character, or who doesn't give a shit enough because they're an adrenaline junkie and they want to chase the adrenaline of not knowing and, then elevate the cortisol, the stress hormone in their brain, so that they've set themselves up for a pool of anxiety and cortisol so that maybe they can say something funny, get a laugh, and then get a dopamine release.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the chemical formula for psychological masturbation, and you can call it improv if you want,
Yeah.
and some people love it, but
What a cocktail.
But I don't have to watch it. I told you earlier, I was sort of surprised by how many people here in Poland are like studying Game of the Scene. And Game of the Scene to me is the greatest improvisational instruction manual for improvising in a way that would yield sketch comedy.
Yes.
But I know the founders, I know the writers of the book, and that's just a way to improvise. And the idea is if you improvise this way and you transcribed what you did, that script, that transcription would look like great sketch comedy. But to watch that, unless you're a nerd who's like watching I'm watching to see you in this process and how you execute it. Like some young kids will go to an arena and watch other kids play video games on a video screen.
Yes.
For the general audience, they're missing something because they're not in on what the engineering of this process is. So all they can do is watch this and hope that the math plus the jazz that shows up within Game of the Scene can at least give them some laughs. Mm-hmm. Because if you take a scene that was improvised from that formula and you do transcribe it and then put it on stage as a sketch, you're going to make little tweaks, you're going to costume people, you're going to set the stage, you're going to optimize that as a piece of sketch comedy that will then become a different thing than what you had when it was originally improvised. Mm-hmm. And so I tell people, I love Game of the Scene. I love it as that proposition. I love that Matt and Ian especially, wrote that book and put it out. But it's only a part of the picture. And they both admit it's not the only way to improvise. It's just how they like improvising.
Sure.
So we are all allowed to like improvising the way we like to improvise, and we're all allowed to not care for other types of improvisation without being, a snotty asshole about it.
Yes. And as we talked yesterday, and combining it to the TikTok and attention span, that the UCB book is just more approachable than Johnston and Spolin.
Yeah.
It's just colorful. It's easy. It's graphically attractive.
Yeah, it's a manual.
It's a manual. And Viola, as we talked yesterday, well...
It's I love Mick Napier's take on that book. Like, bring a book to that book. Yes. And it's like, I don't have to revere Spolin. I don't. She's the mother of modern improv. Yeah, great. Cool. I don't revere her. I respect what she did. I respect what she did with immigrant women and children, really even more than her writing the manual. But I'm not going to knock anybody for loving Spolin. And I know a bunch of amazingly talented people that love that and love being in the process of Spolin. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to read that. I thumbed my way through that book and I was like, no, thank you. Mm-hmm. I've seen teachers who just, they live for it and they do, if I never see another gibberish game in my life, I'll die happy. But
true.
there's people that fucking love gibberish.
Yes.
I'm just not one of them.
I know.
And that's okay.
And what did Patty say? Because I interrupted you, the thoughts. We were talking about leaving the show or watching.
Yeah,
for a moment.
Patty helps me be a better person.
Oh, how nice of her.
I would just leave, mm-hmm. and I didn't have those words. But Patty was the one that gave me the words. I was no longer able to be a good audience member.
Yeah. I resonate with that.
And I never thought of it as that. What is the responsibility of an audience member? Mm-hmm. And there is none if you just paid a ticket and you're outside of improvisation, outside of, stakes in theatrical improvisation. Mm-hmm. Because this is my life. I feel like I have a stake in anything that shows up on stage as theatrical improvisation. And so I'm a participant in whatever happens on stage, even as an audience member.
Yes, me too.
And especially at a festival, I don't think anybody should have to see or even be expected to see every show. And I think that there's even some people, that are some of the new leadership that's coming up where, it used to be like a cool nerd challenge to try to see every show in some festivals. Well, now there's people that are organizing festivals, and it's like kind of softly mandated that, like, you better be there for every show, you better be there to support. And, because they make that mandate, they take away the agency of the individual to literally, honestly, authentically be in support of that show.
This is awful.
It's awful. And it deludes the people on stage that are not doing good improvisation into thinking they are doing good improvisation. Mm-hmm. And because a lot of those people just are seeking to solidify egos, or at least confidence in themselves, mandating people to be there, to have butts in the seats, and giving fake, to give phony feedback, even just by your being there. If you don't care to be there, it doesn't help anybody. It might help. It might help the organizers who have reviewers or sponsors in the audience who would value seeing more people in the seats. Mm-hmm. But now, is our aspiration for something, artistic, or is it just, are we just spinning the commerce wheel and just putting on a fake show that an actual show can be a part of?
Yeah.
And anybody has a right to do that if they want.
Yeah, sure. For me, it's, I learned in the last years that I can actually leave the show. Mm-hmm. Because before that I was so much in the piece of myself that is a savior, a helper, etc. You know the one.
The basket of codependence that a lot of us carry into this art form.
Yes.
Did I say art form? I meant
Yes. So that, and then I felt responsible for them, for the show, even though I was just sitting in the audience. But then if someone asks for a suggestion, I am like, I need to give them the best suggestion in the world so they can have the best show, for example. Mm-hmm. And I very often shout suggestions in improv.
Yeah. It's, I relate to the impulse. Sometimes I'll give a suggestion. I almost always have the impulse, and then I'll say, I'll let a suggestion out of my mouth once out of every 20 impulses.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
There's also a school of thought, and there's people that are very vocal on Facebook about how other improvisers should never get a suggestion. But again, there's more people. Facebook is an illusion.
Oh, so much. And even Facebook gives you an illusion of status of people.
Facebook's not the improv world at all. Facebook became an aquarium during COVID that is nothing but a fish aquarium. And then chat groups about improv are little porcelain castles in the fish aquarium. Yeah. And then different people want to be the kings, queens, or non-binary royalty of different castles so that they can mandate right and wrong behaviors.
Oh, God, yes.
And so none of that is relevant and none of that matters. Again, people get drug releases from engaging in it. And I think there are some worthwhile groups, and I think it serves a purpose. A big reason I do what I do is to make the world smaller amongst people that I value and people that I feel think in a way that is, helpful at least to an artistic condition. It feels like at any point the world could just tip towards this collection of authoritarian mafias where everybody's, in a little nationalistic fucking nightmare, and that politicians and religious overlords will try to keep us from speaking at each other's language, performing in each other's, creating with each other in different ways, or valuing things that are beyond what they would mandate upon us. And so maybe even amongst people I don't care for, that we all are improvisers and doing improvisation, it'll give this way of thinking a chance to have some type of fuck you to political and religious leaders that might serve humanity in some way. But I mean, even that I think is grandiose, and I don't think I'll see anything like that before I die. So whatever.
Yeah, but I think that's as far as I see on Facebook in last years, I have a feeling like improv has turned into kind of a moral compass vibe. That there's a lot of discussions that are very important, but it's like there's a lot of saying like what we can do, what we cannot in a moral
Sure. Sure.
way.
I think the world is patriarchal and misogynist. I think the world is racist.
Yeah.
I think everyone's racist to some degree. Even if you want to call bias racism, that's fine. And so I think the plight of the underserved has gotten some recognition in beating back authoritarians. I think women have gained more power in the world. And I think there's more of a focus on diversity of gender, of color, of point of view. But I think, even DEI initiatives, and I'm fully aware I'm an old white guy. And I'm fully fine with people hating me or telling me to, check my privilege or whatever. And I'm aware of my privilege. I'm aware of my privilege, of my maleness, of my relative, depending on the era, straightness. I've
Depending on the era.
depending on
Yes.
the era. I've, I'm privileged because I'm tall. I'm privileged because I'm bald. I'm privileged because I'm American. I'm privileged because I left the Catholic Church. I'm privileged because I have intellect. I'm privileged because I was abused by my parents. I'm privileged that I survived abuse. I'm privileged that I can have access to a therapist. I'm privileged that I was one of two white guys on a high school basketball team. And I'm privileged that when my mother was in a mental institution, I learned the value of black women as mother figures in a context that very few other white kids may have seen. And so I don't give a fuck about anybody hating me or trying to shout me down because of my privilege. It's a privilege to be an improviser. It's a privilege for someone who's stepping on the stage for the first time of any gender, race, orientation, whatever. It's a privilege to step on that stage. The world is made up of animals that are called humans that aspire to privilege. And so for me, I believe that inclusion is the subjective most important thing of all, because I can act in a loving way that immediately speaks to my inclusiveness when we meet face to face. I'm not an organizer. I get to travel the world and perform with people from all over. And I believe that I can include any individual I meet into the love that I have to extend. And I'm fine with people hating me, begrudging me, trying to cancel me. You can't. You can just not invite me to your thing. And that's great too. But because so many of these things are legislated out of fear and out of a sense of injustice, legislating improvisation based on larger global issues is something that improvisation will have to and is getting through, and it's going to come out the other side, and there's going to be an awareness, which will ultimately be the only value of this, that if the opportunity arises to perform with people that are cut from a different, cookie dough than you are, that's probably going to be a cool thing to step into. And humans are humans. Humans carry fears. Humans want to be loved. Humans want to be a part of something. And it's also natural for humans who are part of a group that's been marginalized or others to be fucking pissed off and to rail against it. But the world's big enough, and really, if you want to put it into a war metaphor, I'll be an old white guy now. If you want to put it into a war metaphor, if we're fighting injustice, militaries are made up of more than flamethrowers and guns. They're also made up of spies and strategists and technicians, and they're made up of how do we deal with this injustice on the land, on the seas, and in the air, literally and metaphorically. How do we have diplomats walk in and face other people when you have gross differences, hatred of each other, whatever? Diplomacy is more valuable than guns and fire. And when people are trying to legislate righteousness into, improvisation, which in the world is just a way that we walk through life. We walk through life improvising in many ways that aren't theater. If you want to try to legislate that, then really you're trying to control people. And you're in denial that it takes a lot of different approaches in order to correct injustice. And so it's natural to assume and to witness that people will be afraid of being accused as, quote unquote, the enemy. But what my role is, probably one that's more of a diplomat and somebody that wherever I go, I can be of service to whoever I'm at there. And if you don't want me there to be in service to your people, I welcome your not inviting me.
Yes.
So I don't know if that rant is good for anything. But...
Well, I didn't want to interrupt, and I think I have nothing to add because you did pretty well.
Except I talked over you as a man, and I didn't give the woman space to talk.
Of course, even though it's her podcast and she asked you a question.
Oh, I love you.
I love you too. I don't have any more to add to this topic, so I will just go to the question from Piotr. Because I asked on Instagram, just for you people listening, I asked on Instagram if anyone wants to ask a question to Joe or whatever. He said, when we were going to Wrocław, about people who complain that teachers teach basic things, bring something.
What he told me, and I can't remember. I think I met him initially in Amsterdam, and I don't know if he took a class from me or not. I don't know what he knew about me, but I think he was trying to just let me know what the state of students in Poland relative to international teachers. And he described it, I think this is close to accurate, as kind of two groups. One that is... yeah, they keep it too basic. I didn't really learn anything. I just did some exercises, and there really wasn't any insight or anything new. They were just, maybe of the cut I talked about before of improv can teach itself. And if you can show up and just run a few exercises and give a little bit of individual feedback about what might be blocking somebody from being more connected, then you can be an improv teacher. And so you can, it takes some people 5 years. It takes some people never to be able to say, just like we need to know who we are as improvisers, we need to know who we are as teachers.
Yes.
And so I know what I teach, and I know why I teach it. And I'm also privileged to be the son of two teachers. So it's in my blood, and I've got a pretty good eye. So I'm like, you're not going to have a problem with me teaching something that's too basic. And I think the other one was...
so, if I may ask,
yeah.
So what type, I don't know how, English, what teacher are you?
I mean, I'm a teacher that teaches the behavioral neuroscience of presence, and I teach what presence is. And I teach that in each of our head there's a jazz musician and an engineer, and I teach what properties define the engineer and what properties define the jazz musician. Among them, the engineer is a part of our brain that always sees us as alone. It's where our ego lives, and it's the part of our brain that, as a baseline, is guided by anxiety and fear, mostly of being right, being correct, being funny, all of that. And then the jazz musician is the part of our brain that knows we're already connected and that knows that in a theatrical improvisation context, its sole desire is to live the evidence of our togetherness and harmony and elevate our presence with each other into a realm that's greater than either of us individually. And it also knows that the engineer is the HR department for the jazz musician. So we're not allowed to be connected. We're not allowed to have euphoria. We're not allowed to dance, to sing, to move towards greatness unless our engineer brain feels safe and secure. And so that's an even longer answer, but that gives you a taste of what I teach. But almost everything that I teach, whether it's format, whether it's acting, whether it's character, whether it's scene, whether it's long form organic or long form specific, I will bring up, and this is why I'm writing the book, is so that I don't have to talk much about the engineer and the jazz musician anymore, because it brings questions up. But I will use that metaphor to articulate how I see people present or not present, or in conversation with what's here or conversation of what's not here. And I'm also, so that alone gets me invited all over the world. And I'm a good enough performer. I'll never say I'm a great anything. That's for other people to say. I'm a good anything. And I think it's because I'm not out to prove anything. I'm just there to serve. And I'm certainly not going to let anybody else tell me, how to teach them. I told him a few years ago, from Philadelphia all the way up to Boston in the United States, I call it the Type A belt. And I used to go to, more so than these days, I would teach anywhere up in the Northeast in the United States, and there'd always be some dudes. Man, I'm so glad you're here. Man, I'm fucking up. I need you to kick my ass. I just need you to kick my ass because I don't know what the fuck is wrong with me. I can't play a fucking character that's connected and gets what the fuck is going on. And I have ideas and I can't. And they speak like this. And then their prescription for how I'm supposed to teach them is to kick their ass.
Yes.
So there's some of that here.
There are people who, students, it's rare, but it is a type of a person who tells me that I'm not giving them. In Polish, it's like, że nie daję im uwag. Uwaga would be kind of a criticism. That is not just, it has a bit several meanings, but in a way that the feedback is not critical enough.
Yep.
Some of them say. And I'm like, but I'm telling you the directions.
Yeah.
But they're like, no, but you need to tell me what the fuck is wrong with me.
Yeah, that's right. Because even if they're not practicing anymore or their parents aren't practicing anymore, this is the trauma of Catholicism.
Oh, yeah, welcome to Poland.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I was raised by
I know.
very Catholic people. It's in Poland. I mean, France is even a couple of generations beyond, but there's still Catholic trauma in France, and there's all kinds of Catholic trauma in Ireland. There's Catholic trauma in South America. There's, in Catholic those people that I'm telling you about, a lot of them are expats from religious families, a lot of them Catholic. And I mean, when you're born, if part of the dogma is you're born a sinner,
Oh, oh yeah.
I mean, that's not a great start.
No.
And if you're and if you're from a line of people who for generations believed that, then I do believe in generational trauma on a cellular level, and I do believe that cells get passed down and vibrate with certain, the wiring in your brain gets built based on data from the cells that it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And there's studies about children and grandchildren of people from war-torn areas where bombs were dropped, and they have anxiety like me and you. We both
Yes.
we both have different kinds of anxiety or whatever.
Yes.
And I think some of it is religion, and in a lot of cases, like religion, that's the only thing that people have to hold on to that gives them any type of hope
Yes.
in the face of this fucking trauma.
Yes. That's very also it is very like rooted in Poland.
Yeah.
During war, after war, during communism, the Pope was a big thing, and as I'm critical in general, but as my dad was telling me, because he was very active with fighting the communism and doing like underground stuff,
Stuff.
underground stuff. He got like medals from president, this stuff. Now I feel like Gen Z, but but he was saying that he must admit that during the times of communism, like the Pope was a very big thing about like hope in Poland, as
Yep.
and then the communism ended, and then different things happened.
Yep.
Anyway, so trauma, yes. So generational trauma, war, yes, present in Poland, of course. Like even though, as you said, that I'm a one generation next to you, but I still had a direct contact with people who were at war, because these were my grandparents.
Yep.
And they all passed now, but when I was a kid, that the normal conversations during like a Christmas or whatever were like Warsaw Rising, and like how this uncle was killed and that was killed, and how they escaped the country and they stayed, and everything, like trauma, and like I had nightmares. And as I talked with my friends from my generation, we all had nightmares when we were kids about war. Not like boogeyman. No one was scared of ghosts when we were kids. Of course, from pop culture, yes, but we were scared of war, and that we will be shot or like killed with bombs. When there were like some sirens outside for some reason, we would think that, oh, they are coming.
Yeah.
There are planes with bombs probably flying there, and they are coming for us. So that's war. That's oppression during communism, for example. But also the system, the school system is fucked in Poland. I mean, in general, it's Prussian system, as it's called, and it's rooted in punishment and shaming.
Yeah.
So if
Catholic
you don't,
schools in the United States.
yes. So this is, even if these schools were public, not Catholic, but just it was still like people. I just I make jokes sometimes when I host a show and I ask a question to the audience, like who, what, something. People don't usually, they tend not to speak. They raise their hands, and I'm like, oh guys, like, oh my God, we are so traumatized after school, and people are scared to speak up because they will say something stupid, and then they will be punished in front of the class or whatever. So everything is still somewhere there.
It is requiring people to raise their hands keeps order, which takes away from people the opportunity to see harmony. So raising your hands and then somebody calling on you is a patriarchal fucking construct. Even the public schools, all grade schools in the United States are designed in this very same way to create factory workers.
Right.
Show
yes.
up on time, respect authority, don't mouth off, follow the rules. And now these motherfuckers over there want to put the 10 Commandments and, in public schools. It's fucking insane. And the nature of improvisation is we can be connected and in harmony with each other as long as we feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what feeling safe can mean to some people is we understand the rules. And in the religious parts of the South, when somebody new moves into the neighborhood, the first question somebody says is, well, now what church are you going to go to?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
In
wow.
the South.
Okay.
That's a Southern thing. And that's like Baptist, Protestant. That's some of that stuff. Because if they know you're going to go to church, then they know that you're going to abide by a set of rules that they're also.
Yes.
We're on the same page here, and then we can have dinner and sweet tea, and we can talk about which version of the rules apply to you. Mm. And I can't imagine being this close to bombs and communism, but I also grew up, the generation before me was World War II, but the people that were a half a generation before me were Vietnam.
This is crazy. Yes.
And World War II is America's big, giant dick. And like the greatest generation, and we, we fought the enemy, and the Allies and the Axis told the story of what humanity was about. And even from World War II, even through Korea, the United States in 1955 put the word God on our money. And they put the word God in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. Uh-huh. Because nobody in the United States gave a shit about communism until the politicians and the media, they started saying godless communists.
Oh, wow.
Godless communists is what made Americans go, hold on, now what? They don't, it's like, no, they just have a system, and it's like everybody gets to, benefit off their own work and whatever. What do you mean? They're godless?
Oh, okay.
And that's why that's still the baggage that America carries, that all of you over here in beautiful secular Europe, even like a generation after communism, yes. It's like that's why we're so psychotically religious. Mm. And for me, it's like, everybody should be able to believe whatever they need to believe just to deal with how insane life is.
Yes.
But once you talk about the conservatives or the extremes of every religion, especially the Abrahamic religions, if you can't see how that's a fucking con, then I got no help for you. It's a psychological Ponzi scheme. Do you know what a Ponzi scheme is? It's like a pyramid scheme, right? And the con artists are the evangelicals and the people who go try to convert people, and it's all based in you can have everlasting life for all of eternity and happiness and joy, or you're gonna burn in hell. And I mean, I can't say anything better than George Carlin said it. And thankfully, people all over the world mostly can see his videos.
Yes.
But it's in that process, fear and punishment, like you say, the Prussian school and shame. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's puritanical America. Mm-hmm. And ironically, it's as much in the extreme right as it is in the extreme left. Autocrats in the Democratic Party that are waiting to take over too. There's people that are chasing all the monsters that are in the right in the Republican Party, and they're fucking awful. But they're on either side of the ideology. When you have a binary of ideology, there are fucking monsters waiting to take over. Yeah. Because there are sheep. Mm-hmm. That is what people that believe in religions are referred to as, waiting to believe in things that are told to them by authority without any evidence that they're true. And they're convinced that all they need to do is to have faith. Whereas in improv, we don't know if this show will be good or if this show will be bad. And hope isn't going to help us. But being present right now at least gives us a shot to see what we've got at the end. And if we can just harmonize in whatever context we're doing here, and whether it's recreational or a hobby or professional, if we can just harmonize and fucking love each other, we got a shot.
Yes.
And if we fail, great. Guess what? That show's over.
Exactly. Oh, you said that it was something that in one of your workshops, I don't remember if you just said it like, huh?
No, it's the Mark Sutton quote.
Okay.
So my best prop partner has 10 times better quotes than I do, but he's too lazy to, well, he's a responsible father and husband and has 2 kids, and he just doesn't tour that much. But he is the one that said,
Yeah, say it. Yes.
Yeah, the great thing that a wonderful improv show and a horrible improv show have in common is they're over.
Yes. And I love this quote.
I do too. It's great.